What I walked in on inside my own kitchen didn't look like cheating, but it quietly destroyed everything I thought my marriage was built on. It was early evening, just after 6. I remember because the sky outside still had color, that soft blue that makes you think the day isn't over yet. I came home earlier than usual, not because of an emergency, not because I had plans. I was just tired of always arriving after everything had already happened. When I opened the front door, I expected quiet. Maybe the hum of the fridge. Maybe the TV on low. Instead, I heard laughter. It wasn't loud. It wasn't wild. It was easy. It came from the kitchen, drifting down the hallway like it belonged there. At first, I smiled. I thought, good. Evan sounds relaxed. But then I realized something felt off. That laugh didn't sound like the one he shared with me anymore. His laugh with me used to be careless, loud enough to fill space, the kind that didn't stop itself. This one was softer, controlled, shared. I stood there longer than I should have, my hand still on the door, listening like a guest who wasn't sure she was welcome yet. That was the first moment my stomach tightened. I took off my shoes quietly and walked toward the kitchen. The closer I got, the clearer it became. Evan was leaning against the counter. Maya sat on one of the stools, one knee pulled up, holding a mug I recognized instantly. My mug. They were facing each other. Not the room. Not the counter. Each other. When I stepped into the doorway, the laughter stopped. Not slowly. Not naturally. It just ended. They didn't look at me right away. They looked at each other first. It was quick. Almost nothing. But it was enough. Then Evan smiled too fast. Hey, you're home early. Maya stood up immediately, like she needed to prove something. I didn't know you were getting off early, she said, her voice gentle in a way that felt practiced. I nodded and set my bag down. You two having fun? I asked. It sounded casual. I worked hard to keep it that way. Yeah, Evan said. Just talking. Just talking. I walked to the fridge, pretending I needed water, even though my throat felt tight. The kitchen looked normal. Clean counters. A pot on the stove. The smell of soap still in the air. Nothing looked wrong. But something felt wrong. Maya kept talking, filling the space. Asking about my day. Offering to help with dinner. Evan hovered nearby, attentive in a way that felt unfamiliar. Like he was trying to convince me nothing had changed. I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself I was tired. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd walked in on something I wasn't meant to hear. Because the laugh I heard from the hallway never came back. And I couldn't remember the last time Evan laughed like that with me. Not once I was in the room. That was the moment I realized something small had already shifted. And I didn't know yet how much it was going to cost me. That night, lying next to him, I replayed that laugh over and over, wondering when I stopped being part of it. Have you ever felt like something changed without anyone explaining when or why? Once I noticed the distance, I couldn't unsee how often I was standing right there while something passed between them. The next morning, Evan stood in the kitchen in his socks, scrolling on his phone while the coffee brewed. When he noticed me, he tilted the screen away slightly. Not fast, not dramatic, just enough. That movement stayed with me longer than it should have. At work, I found myself checking my phone more often than usual. Not because I expected a message from him, but because I didn't. Around midday, Maya texted me. Just checking in. How are you feeling today? It should have felt kind. Instead, I noticed what she didn't ask. She didn't ask what I was doing. She didn't ask how my day was going. She asked how I was feeling. Like she already knew something had shifted. I replied that I was fine. A few minutes later, another message came through. Evan seemed a little off yesterday. I just want to make sure he's okay too. I stared at my phone, rereading that sentence until my chest felt tight. When had my best friend started managing my husband's emotions? That night, Evan barely put his phone down during dinner. He kept it close, face down, then face up, then back down again. Every buzz pulled his attention away. Busy? I asked lightly. Work stuff, he said, without looking up. I didn't push. I didn't want to be the person who needed explanations. But later, while we sat on the couch, I noticed something else. They had inside language now. Little phrases, shared references, a tone that didn't need explaining. When I tried to join the conversation, it felt like stepping into the middle of something already finished. I didn't feel jealous. I felt unnecessary. That was harder to admit. A few days later, I called my sister Naomi. She answered on the second ring, like she always did. I didn't know how to start, so I didn't soften it. I think I'm being slowly pushed out of my own marriage, I said. There was silence on the line. Then she asked, "What makes you feel that way?" I told her everything. The laughter, the phone, the texts, the way Maya hovered. Naomi didn't interrupt. When I finished, she said, "That sounds like emotional closeness being redirected." I swallowed. "You think I'm overreacting?" "No," she said gently. "I think you're noticing something real." She explained it calmly. How it usually starts. How it doesn't look dramatic. How it hides behind good intentions. "How do I know for sure?" I asked. "You don't," she said. "Not yet. So what do I do?" There was a pause. Then she said, "You watch. You stop filling in the gaps for him. You let people show you who they're choosing." That night I made a decision. I wouldn't accuse. I wouldn't argue. I wouldn't beg for reassurance. I would pay attention. And once I did, I started noticing how much Evan shared with Maya before he shared with me. I heard it in her voice when she spoke to him, like she already knew the story. I saw it in his expressions, like he was relieved I didn't ask follow-up questions anymore. Silence became my choice, and the quiet started telling me more than any argument ever could. By the end of that week, I knew one thing for certain. If I kept watching, I was going to find something I couldn't ignore. Would you confront early, or wait until you knew the truth for sure? I wasn't searching for proof, but when it showed up, it explained everything I'd been trying not to believe. It happened late, close to midnight. Evan had fallen asleep quickly, the way he always did when he felt unbothered. His breathing settled into that steady rhythm that used to comfort me. Now it just made me feel awake. I lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment from the last few weeks. Every look, every pause, every time I told myself I was overthinking. Eventually, I got out of bed. I told myself I was just getting water. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes small sounds feel louder than they are. The fridge hummed. The clock on the stove glowed faintly. That's when I saw it. Evan's laptop was open on the kitchen table. He never left it like that. I stood there longer than I should have, my hands cold, my heart steady in a way that scared me. I could still walk away. That choice was still available. But I didn't. I sat down slowly and looked at the screen. His messages were open, and Maya's name was right there. Not hidden, not disguised, just there. I opened the thread. The first thing I read wasn't romantic. It was emotional. I don't know why I can say this to you so easily. I felt my chest tighten. I scrolled. There were long messages, sent late at night. Comfort offered freely. Words that belonged in a marriage, shared somewhere else. She told him she believed in him. He told her he felt understood. He told her things he had never told me. I felt a sharp wave of grief move through me, heavy and slow. Because I would have listened. I would have stayed up. I would have held those fears with him. But he hadn't brought them to me. He'd taken them to her. I kept reading, my hand steady now. It wasn't flirting. It was intimacy. The kind that grows quietly and convinces people they're not doing anything wrong. Then I saw something that stopped me completely. An old message. Years old. A screenshot Evan had sent her. It was from his past, an argument with his ex. I recognized his words immediately. If you're opening up to someone else emotionally, that's cheating. I stared at the screen. My breathing slowed. I scrolled again. Another line. I won't stay where I'm the last person you trust with your feelings. The room felt smaller. Because that was exactly what he was doing to me. And he knew it. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't ignorance. He had already named the line once in his life. He just chose to cross it now. I kept reading until my eyes burned. No explicit photos. No plans to meet. But there was longing. There was dependence. There were messages sent while I was asleep beside him. Messages sent while I was folding laundry. Messages sent while I believed we were still sharing a life. I closed the laptop slowly. My reflection stared back at me from the dark window over the sink, and I barely recognized myself. Not because I looked different, because my trust was gone. I went back to bed and lay beside Evan without touching him. His arm rested near me, familiar and wrong at the same time. I stared into the dark and understood something that changed everything. I couldn't keep this to myself. Not anymore. Because now I wasn't guessing. I knew. And knowing meant something had to happen next. Lying there beside him, I realized the next conversation would decide what kind of person I was willing to become. Once you know the truth, do you confront immediately, or wait until you can speak without breaking? When I finally said it out loud, he didn't deny it. He just told me it wasn't what I thought. I waited until morning. Not because I wanted to surprise him, but because I needed daylight. I needed to see his face clearly when I spoke. Evan sat at the kitchen table, coffee in hand, scrolling on his phone like it was any other day. "Can we talk?" I asked. He looked up, relaxed. "Sure." I sat across from him, hands folded, my voice steady in a way that surprised even me. "I read your messages with Maya." He froze. Not in panic. In irritation. "Why were you on my laptop?" he asked. That was the first thing he chose to focus on. "It was open," I said. "I saw her name. I read everything." He leaned back, rubbing his face like I'd inconvenienced him. "Nothing happened," he said. I nodded. "You're right. Nothing physical happened." He relaxed slightly, like he thought that settled it. "But you gave her parts of you that belong with me," I continued. "You talked to her about your fears. You leaned on her. You let her be the person you opened up to." "That's not cheating," he said quickly. "I was just talking. You've been distant. I didn't want to put more on you." The words landed hard, because part of me recognized myself in them. I had been tired. I had been quieter. But that didn't excuse this. "So you chose my best friend," I said. "That's not fair," he replied. "You're making this bigger than it is." I looked at him and felt something settle inside me. "You already defined this once," I said. "With your ex. You said emotional closeness outside the relationship was crossing a line." His eyes flickered. "That was different," he said. "How?" I asked. "Because then it hurt you?" His jaw tightened. "You're overreacting," he said. "You should be happy I can talk to someone instead of bottling everything up." That sentence ended something in me. Not loudly. Cleanly. I stood up. "I'm calling Maya," I said. He immediately shook his head. "Don't." I called anyway. She answered, cheerful at first, then silent when she realized I was there. "I read the messages," I said. She started crying almost instantly. "I was just trying to help," she said. "He needed someone. I didn't want to upset you." I asked her one question. "Are you willing to step back?" There was a pause. Then she said, "I don't want him to feel alone." That was all I needed to hear. She wasn't choosing me, and Evan wasn't asking her to. I ended the call and looked at him. He didn't apologize. He didn't ask how I felt. He just looked tired. That's when I knew the argument was already over. Because I wasn't fighting for answers anymore. I was deciding my future. I walked away from the table, knowing the next choice wouldn't be loud, but it would be permanent. If your partner refused to see emotional betrayal as real, would you stay and keep explaining? Or stop altogether? I didn't scream, leave dramatically, or expose anyone, but I did something none of them expected. I went quiet. Not the kind of quiet that punishes. The kind that happens when you stop offering pieces of yourself to people who don't protect them. I still lived in the house. Still went to work. Still paid bills. Still folded laundry. But I stopped doing the invisible work. I stopped checking Evan's moods before my own. Stopped asking if he was okay. Stopped smoothing things over when silence made him uncomfortable. At first, he didn't notice. That hurt more than I thought it would. He moved through his days assuming I'd always fill the space between us, like I always had. Then one night, a few days later, he asked, "Are you mad at me?" I looked at him and realized I wasn't angry. "I'm tired," I said. That answer unsettled him. Maya texted me twice that week. Then again. Messages that shifted from friendly to uneasy. "I miss you. Can we talk? I hate how this feels." I didn't respond. Not to punish her. Because I finally understood that explaining myself again would only reopen something I was trying to close. She faded quietly. No confrontation. No goodbye. Just absence. Evan noticed that too. He started trying harder. Cooking dinner. Asking questions. Suggesting counseling like it was a casual idea. But something had already changed in me. Effort doesn't undo awareness. One evening, I sat alone on the couch while he showered. The TV was on low. The house smelled like clean laundry. And for the first time in weeks, my chest didn't feel tight. I felt sad, but steady. That's when it became clear to me. Justice wasn't revenge. It was removal. Removing myself from the role of emotional caretaker. Removing my energy from people who took without asking. Removing the version of me that stayed quiet just to keep peace. Evan came out and sat beside me. Careful. I feel like you're slipping away, he said. I didn't look at him. I already did, I said softly. He swallowed. Are you leaving? I don't know yet, I replied. And that was the truth. I didn't know if the marriage would survive, but I knew I would. He reached for my hand, and for the first time, I didn't automatically take his. That moment said more than any argument ever could. The loudest consequence was silence. Not cold. Honest. Days passed. Then weeks. Some conversations were kind. Some were heavy. Some ended without resolution. Evan was left sitting with the space where my constant care used to live. And I watched him finally understand what it feels like to be the last person someone opens up to. I didn't feel victorious. I felt clear. And that's when I understood what betrayal really costs. It costs safety. It costs ease. It costs the version of love that didn't need explanations. I chose myself quietly. No audience. No spectacle. Just truth. Some betrayals don't leave bruises, just absence. And next time, I'll tell you about the one that didn't come from my partner, but hurt even worse. Subscribe to True Lies Diaries for more real stories you won't forget.